The girl behind the metal veil asterisk for 18 years. The people of Vorthen whispered stories about the girl in the tower. They called her cursed, locked, and untouchable. Some said she was a weapon sealed away by her father, the High Warden. Others believed she was a fallen goddess punished for loving a mortal. But no one ever got close enough to know the truth. Inside the Golden Tower, behind layers of shields and silence, sat Villari. Her upper body was tall, graceful, her skin shimmering with violet tones under the soft light. But from her waist down, she was trapped in armor. Not battle armor, not clothing, but an ancient, seamless construct that clung to her hips like a second skin. They called it the Iron Pants, but it was not made of any iron known to humans. It hummed faintly when touched, and it never came off, not even when she slept. She had never walked freely since she was 6. She had never left the tower since that same day. Her father locked her legs with alien tech from the old empire. He said it was to protect her honor, to preserve her bloodline. But Villari knew the truth. It was to control her, to ensure she never chose her own mate. Far across the Vorthen desert, a small ship crash-landed into red sand. Smoke poured from its engines as the hatch opened and a lone human stumbled out. His name was Jace Calder. He wasn't a hero, not a soldier, just a scrapper looking for old tech to sell. His ship had been pulled off course by a magnetic storm. Now he was stranded, out of food, and walking toward the only building he saw on the horizon. The Golden Tower gleamed under twin suns. Its gates were unguarded, because no one dared to enter. But Jace was human, and humans didn't believe in Vorthen myths. He stepped through the doorway, dust on his boots, eyes scanning the strange architecture. Every step echoed through the silent halls, until he heard something unusual: music, faint, broken, like a lullaby playing through an old speaker. He followed the sound, and the door opened without asking for his name. Villari sat near the window, watching birds fly across the pink sky. When she heard footsteps, her breath froze. No one visited her chamber, not without her father's command, and certainly not a human. Jace stood in the doorway, stunned. He saw her face, young yet wise, soft yet sharp, and then he saw the metal, wrapping her lower body like a prison. "I'm sorry," he said, raising his hands. "I didn't mean to intrude." Villari didn't move. "You are not from here," she said, her voice calm. "Curious? Nope," Jace replied, glancing at the strange armor. "Wasn't expecting to find a princess in iron pants." Her lips curled slightly, the first smile she had made in years. Most visitors bowed or begged or called her sacred, but this human just spoke plainly, like she was normal. He stepped closer, studying the armor. "I've seen tech like this in ruins," he muttered. "Old empire stuff, integrated code, sealed bonding. You can read it?" She asked, shocked. "A little," Jay said, reaching out without thinking. As his fingers brushed the metal, the surface pulsed with blue light. Villari gasped. In 18 years, no one, not her father, not the priests, not the nobles, had ever triggered a reaction from the armor. It responded to him. Her heart pounded in her chest. Not out of fear, but hope. "You need to leave," she said suddenly. "If they find you here, they'll kill you." "Who's they?" Jace asked. "My father's enforcers," she whispered, standing up as far as the armor allowed. "They will see you as a threat." "Let them," Jace said, stepping back. "I'm not here to fight, but now I really want to know why." "Are you wearing that?" She looked away. "I disobeyed a tradition," she said. "And for that, he locked me like this, to wait for a male of our species to unlock it. And none came?" "None were worthy, or so he claimed." Jay stared at the armor again, his mind racing. He didn't care about ancient customs. All he saw was a young woman imprisoned by a father who feared her freedom. Outside the tower, alarms suddenly blared. Jace's ship had been found. Guards were coming. Villari turned to him, her voice trembling. "You need to hide now." But Jace didn't move. Instead, he looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm not leaving without knowing your name." She blinked, caught off guard. "Villari," she said. All right, Valari, Jace whispered. Let's find the key, the chains of honor. Wind howled through the halls of the Golden Tower as the guards stormed in. Boots thundered against the polished stone, and the sound of plasma rifles charging echoed through the silence. Jace didn't run. He stood beside Valari, heart pounding but hands calm. She looked at him with wide eyes, unsure if she should scream or protect him. Then her hand moved, fast and sharp, slamming her palm against a hidden panel on the wall. A secret doorway opened behind her bed, revealing a small tunnel. In there, she hissed. Now, Jace. Ducked inside just as the chamber doors burst open. 7 guards rushed in, tall, silver-armored, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. Their eyes scanned the room and landed on Valari, who stood still as stone. Were you alone? One barked, voice filtered through static. Valari's voice was cold and sharp. Have I ever not been alone? The guards backed away slightly, uncertain. No one questioned the girl with iron pants. Not directly. She carried her father's blood and his authority. Even if she was imprisoned, they scanned the room. But the human was gone, moments later. They filed out, leaving the chamber untouched. Only when the door sealed again did Jace crawl out from the hidden passage, covered in dust. That was close, he whispered. Too close, Valari replied, her hands shaking slightly. You should not have come here. Jace dusted himself off. You said that already, but the armor reacted to me, and that's exactly why you must leave, she said, stepping closer. If they find out the iron responded to a human, they will kill you to keep it secret. Why? Because it would mean my father's entire bloodline was wrong. She turned away, her voice trembling. The iron was created by the ancients to recognize only those with royal blood or someone the bearer accepts. Jace blinked. Wait, someone the bearer accepts? Valari nodded slowly. My father erased that part from the records, said it was a myth, said only a royal male could unlock it. Jace looked at her, trying to read her face. So when it responded to me, it wasn't because of my tools or tech, he said. It was because of you. Valari didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Jace took a deep breath. Then we need to find the real way to remove it. Before she could reply, a soft beep echoed from the corner of the room. A communication stone lit up, casting a pale blue light on the wall. Valari stepped forward and touched it, revealing her father's face. The High Warden. He was a tall, cruel-looking alien, with black lines running from his temples to his chin like scars. Daughter, he said coldly, it has come to my attention that a human has entered the sacred tower. Valari kept her voice calm. No outsider has entered, father. I will be conducting a purity trial tomorrow, he said, ignoring her denial. If there is corruption, the iron will reveal it. The stone dimmed, and the message ended. Valari turned to Jace, her eyes wide with fear. The purity trial, she whispered. It's not a test, it's a trap. Jace crossed his arms. Then let's spring it. Valari stared at him, shocked. You're serious? As a broken hyperdrive, he said, grinning. I didn't survive asteroid fields and pirate raids just to walk away from this. But if the iron senses you again in public, my father will execute you. Only if he catches me. Jace said, you said the armor has ancient tech, right? Something coded to your DNA? Yes, she said slowly. But the access was sealed long ago. Maybe, Jace said, pacing. But I've seen ancient relics that carry backup. Logs, sublayer code, failsafes. You think you can hack the iron? I think I can talk to it. That night, in the shadows of her chamber, Jace pulled a small tool from his wristband, a human-made decoder chip with a fusion interface. He pressed it against the side of the iron armor, where a hidden seam glowed. Faintly, Valari held her breath as blue lines traced across her waist, pulsing once, then again. Suddenly, a line of alien script appeared in the air above her hips. Jace leaned in, translating with slow, careful words. System ... locked. He muttered, but Secondary user detected. He turned to Valari, eyes wide. It knows you don't want to be locked anymore, she gasped. Then it can be opened? Maybe, he said. But not here, not now, not with guards watching, he tapped. The floating text and a star map blinked into view, a location deep in the desert. What's that? She asked. Backup terminal, Jay said. The system wants us to go there. Valari looked at the map, her chains glowing faintly. In the dark, it's outside the city walls, she said. Forbidden's land, Jay smiled. My favorite kind. The trial of fire and flesh asterisk. The twin suns had not yet risen when the palace horns cried across the city. The trial of fire was declared, and all nobles were ordered to attend. Guards in silver armor marched to the plaza, weapons drawn, armor polished. At the center stood a towering ring of flame. A test passed down through generations. But this time, the trial was not for a warrior, not for a noble. It was for a prisoner in iron pants, and a human who wasn't even supposed to be. There, Jace stood beneath the red banners, eyes scanning the alien crowd. He felt like prey in a coliseum. Everyone waiting for him to fail. Valari watched from behind a force field. Her wrists still bound in ceremonial chains. Her father sat on a high throne, silent and unmoved. His eyes fixed on the man who dared to touch what was his. Let it begin, the High Warden spoke, and the ground beneath Jace began to shift. The flames flared high, and the floor turned into moving panels of searing metal. First trial, a voice called out. Walk across the path of pain. Jace's boots began to melt, heat rising like fire in his lungs. But he didn't scream, he didn't run. Instead, he jumped from tile to tile, scanning their patterns. He noticed a sequence, a rhythm. Every fourth tile dimmed slightly before cooling. He used it, dancing across the fire, reaching the end with burns on his legs but defiance in his eyes. The crowd gasped. No human had ever survived the first trial. The High Warden's jaw clenched, but he gave the signal. Second trial. The voice rang again. Face the beast. Of the vault, a door opened, and a creature stepped out, a six-legged monster. Its eyes glowing red, wires trailing from its shoulders, a war relic, half machine, half pain. Built to tear apart intruders, Valari turned pale. She had seen the beast once before when it devoured a traitor in seconds. Jace stared at the monster, his hand slipping to the small device on his belt. He didn't run, he waited, watching how it moved, calculating. When it lunged, he dove sideways and slid under its body. With one fast motion, he jammed the device into a socket on its back. The monster roared, twisted, then froze. A second later, it shut down. Smoke rising from its joints. The crowd was silent, then erupted in shouts, some in anger, some in awe. The High Warden stood from his throne, his voice like thunder. This outsider does not belong in our sacred trials. He has passed them, Valari shouted from the cage. And the iron knows him. Gasps rippled through the nobles. The iron pants shimmered in the sunlight, faint pulses flowing across the armor like veins of light. Jace turned toward the warden, face bruised, arms burned, but eyes alive. Your trials don't scare me, he said. Your lies do. The warden pointed a sharp finger at him. You want to unlock her, he snarled. You think you can change the will of our blood? I don't want to change your blood, Jace said. I want her to choose. Silence for a moment. No one spoke. Then the warden barked one final command. Seal the plaza, he shouted. Kill the outsider. Guards surrounded Jace, their weapons humming. But Valari moved faster than anyone expected. She slammed her chained fists into the floor panel and activated her emergency override. The force field around her shattered, and her chains dropped with a metallic scream. She ran across the plaza, her iron pants glowing brighter with each step. When she reached Jace, the armor flared and let out a chime, like ancient bells ringing from the stars, in front of the stunned crowd. The armor responded not with violence, but with grace. It released a pulse that knocked back the guards and spread a map in the air. A star map, with one location pulsing like a heartbeat. The final key, Jace whispered, staring at the coordinates. It's real, Valari breathed. The system wants us to go there. And I say we do, he said, smiling through the blood on his lip. But we won't make it out of here without help. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the balcony above. An old noble, once loyal to the warden, stepped forward. The girl has the right to freedom, he said, and the iron has chosen. Others began murmuring, some nodding, some stepping back from the warden's side. Amid the chaos, Jace and Valari ran, slipping through the broken gates, chased by alarms and confusion. The city behind them burned in noise and pride. But in front of them lay desert, danger, and the chance to end 18 years of silence. Beneath the forgotten sandstorms howled over the Vorthen dunes as two shadows pushed forward. One was a human with torn clothes and cracked boots. The other was a girl wrapped in glowing metal from the waist down. Behind them, the burning city faded into a blur of smoke and dust. Ahead of them, buried in silence, waited the Forbidden's land, the ruins of Velcareth. No one went to Velcareth, not even scavengers, not even smugglers. They said machines from the old empire still crawled beneath its sands. Some believed it wasn't a city at all, but a graveyard of broken gods. Jace believed it was the only chance they had. He checked the star map again. The beacon pulsed faintly on his wrist display, almost lost in static. We're close, he said. Voice dry from sand and heat, Valari nodded, silent, her eyes locked on the jagged shapes rising in the distance. Sharp black towers, broken by time, reached out of the dunes like the ribs of some buried beast. They stepped over old stone, cracked tablets, and metal bones. The air felt heavier here, like something was watching. Valari's iron pants pulsed gently with each step, reacting to unseen frequencies. This place feels awake, she whispered. Jace didn't reply, but his hand stayed close to his tool belt. At the center of the ruins stood a circular platform with alien carvings. In its heart was a single raised pedestal, just large enough for someone to stand upon. Valari walked to it slowly, as if drawn by instinct. The moment her foot touched the pedestal, the entire structure shook. A deep hum rose from below, followed by a flicker of blue light. The floor split open like petals, revealing a staircase. Spiraling into darkness, without hesitation, Valari stepped inside. Jace followed, his boots echoing off the ancient metal. They descended into a hollow that hadn't been touched for centuries. Walls lined with cables pulsed gently like veins. In the center of the chamber stood a machine, the key core. It floated above a pool of light, spinning slowly, whispering in an old language. Valari stepped forward and raised her hand. The key core responded instantly, scanning her body and locking on the iron signal. Glyphs swirled in the air, forming words Jace could barely understand. Primary seal detected, the machine said. User, Valari, daughter of Warden Koval. Authorization level, restricted. Secondary presence detected. Unknown DN, a match. Error foreign code engaged. The machine flared with red light, alarms buzzing softly. Jace jumped forward, plugging his decoder tool into a side port. I can override it, he said, but I need time. Valari turned to him, eyes wide. We don't have time. Above them, the sands began to rumble. Soldiers had found their trail, and dropships descended like hunting birds. Valari ran to the chamber's edge and saw a monitor light up. The High Warden's crest flashed across it. He's here, she said. And he brought the Royal Enforcers. Jace kept typing, rerouting. The machine's logic layers. It's trying to lock me out, he growled. But this tech still runs on sequence-based code. He tapped furiously as the lights flickered between red and blue. Valari stepped beside him and placed her palm on the console. Link to me, she said. If the iron knows me, maybe the machine will too. A surge of energy flowed through the chamber. The core paused, scanned again, then spoke. Bond. Recognized, it said. Compatibility confirmed. would you like to initiate unsealing protocol? Yes, Valari said, her voice firm. The core glowed brighter, and her iron pants began to heat. The seams shimmered and clicked, tiny locks unfolding in slow motion. But before it could finish, an explosion shook the entire ruin. Rocks fell from above, and the chamber ceiling cracked open. Soldiers in black armor dropped down with rifles aimed. The High Warden stepped through the dust, his face twisted in fury. "You defy my will," he shouted. "You insult your bloodline." Valari turned, her hands sparking with raw energy from the iron's reaction. "You chained me," she said. "For 18 years you called it tradition. But now I know it was only fear." The Warden raised his weapon. "You will kneel," Jace stepped in front of her, arms spread. "Then you'll have to go through me," he said. The soldiers hesitated. No one had ever dared speak to the Warden like that. But before a shot could be fired, the key core flashed again. Warning. It said, "Unsealing incomplete. Do you wish to transfer final command to bonded unit?" Jace and Valari looked at each other. "I trust you," she whispered. Jace nodded. "Then do it." The core fired a thin beam of light into Valari's armor. The iron shimmered, then locked in place again, partially released, but not fully. "It's only partway open," she said, gasping. "The rest," Jace said, "is deeper in the ruins. But now your father knows." The Warden roared as the platform beneath them collapsed, sending Jace and Valari sliding into another tunnel. Lights burst around them, and ancient doors slammed shut behind. They were alone again, but the next path had already begun. The code that spoke her name, * darkness swallowed them. As the tunnel door slammed shut above, Jace rolled to his feet, helping Valari up as glowing lines flickered along the walls. The air felt different here, older, denser, like it remembered. Pain behind them. The sound of shouting guards faded into silence. Ahead of them stretched a narrow corridor made of polished black stone. Each step they took echoed like it was waking something ancient beneath their feet. Valari's iron pants pulsed again, more rhythmically now, like it was syncing with the place. Jace glanced down at the armor and back at the shifting lights around them. "This part of the ruin wasn't on the map," he said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to be." Valari replied, "The key core brought us here for a reason." They reached a massive chamber, hidden far below the surface. A massive vault door stood in the center, wrapped in thick cables and carved with glyphs of the old empire. But what stood before it was even stranger, a mirror, floating in the air, rippling like water. Valari stepped forward, and the mirror rippled again, then solidified into her reflection. Except it wasn't her now, it was her at age 6. Before the armor, before the silence, before her father turned love into prison. The reflection opened its mouth, and in a child's voice, it said her name, Valari. Her knees buckled, and she fell forward. Not from pain, but from memory. Tears welled in her eyes as her younger self reached out, hand to hand. Jace rushed to her side, holding her upright. "What is this?" he asked. "Not a lock," she whispered. "A test of identity." The vault spoke in a voice older than any she had ever heard. "Only the true bearer of the code may proceed. Submit your sequence." Valari blinked. "Sequence?" Jace looked around, scanning the walls. Glyphs moved and shifted like puzzles waiting to be solved. He pointed to 3 of them pulsing together. "They're reacting to your voice print," he said. "Try speaking again." Valari took a breath and stood tall. "I am Valari, daughter of Koval, born of the house of Istherin." The glyphs pulsed brighter. "I was bound by command, but I did not give consent." The floating mirror shimmered, then cracked just once, like a sigh breaking from deep within. The voice responded, identity confirmed. The vault groaned and opened, revealing a circular room filled with spinning crystal cores. In the center was a throne, not for a ruler, but for a decoder. Valari stepped forward, drawn to it by something she didn't understand. The iron on her legs vibrated, humming softly, like it recognized its birthplace. Jace moved to the console beside her, and activated the main terminal. "Last lock," he said, scanning the code as it unfolded in the air. "The iron pants weren't just a seal," he muttered. "They're part of a living network memory. Encryption mixed with control protocols. She wasn't just locked," he said, looking at her. "She was rewritten." Valari froze, her hand clutching the edge of the throne. "My mind?" she asked. "My thoughts?" "Modified," Jace said softly. "To obey." She stared into the glowing data stream, her fingers curling into fists. "No more," she said. "I want it gone." Jace nodded, inserted his tool, and connected the decoder chip. He began unraveling the layers of code, peeling back 20 years of false permissions and command chains. Each string he cut released a pulse through the armor. Valari winced but didn't stop him. "You're almost there," she whispered, voice shaking. "Just one more key." Jace reached the final layer, a sealed lock labeled only with one word. Her name. He pressed it, and the system asked for a password, not in glyphs but in spoken language. "Say your truth," it said. Valari stepped forward and placed her hands on the console. "My name is Valari," she said, "and I was never yours to control." The room went silent. Then a gentle tone rang through the chamber. The iron pants shimmered, vibrated, and unlocked. One by one, the plates unsealed, retracting into themselves like folding petals. Light burst from her legs, followed by warmth she hadn't felt in years. She collapsed into Jace's arms, her legs finally free, trembling with life. The armor crumbled into ash at her feet, the last lock finally broken. But then, the console turned red, and an emergency alert flashed across the wall. "Warning," it said. "Data transmission detected." Jace's eyes widened. "He's watching." Valari stood, her body bare from the waist down but her face filled with fire. "Let him," she said. "He'll know I'm coming." Above them, in a warship orbiting Vorthen, the High Warden watched the broadcast feed in silent fury. His daughter was free, the iron was gone, and the prophecy he buried had awakened. He slammed his fist on the console and gave one final order. "Bring them to me alive." Unsealed, the warship pierced through the clouds like a steel god descending. Its engines screamed across the Vorthen sky, casting shadows over the golden towers. Citizens below ran for cover, thinking war had returned. But this was no invasion, it was a retrieval. Inside its cold metal walls, the High Warden stood alone. At the front viewport, his fingers clenched behind his back as he stared down at the planet he ruled. He had sealed his daughter's body in iron, buried her choice in tradition, and silenced every question with law. Now the law was broken, and his greatest fear had stepped into the light. Valari had been unsealed, and the entire planet knew it. In the ruins below, Jace helped Valari to her feet. Her legs shook but held, her steps unsure but growing stronger. She looked down at herself for the first time without metal, flesh and freedom, real, warm, alive. "I can walk," she whispered. "I can feel." Jace grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You're more than unlocked," he said. "You're unstoppable." But their moment didn't last. The ceiling above cracked open with a roar, and a spotlight cut through the darkness. A voice echoed from the ship above, sharp and cold. "Valari, by order of the Blood Throne, you are to return to custody." She stood tall beneath the beam, her eyes full of fire. "Tell my father I'm coming to him, not as a prisoner, but as his reckoning." They boarded an old transport found buried in the ruins. It groaned as it lifted from the sand, gears protesting, but it flew. Jace piloted while Valari stood at the front window, wind in her hair, eyes locked on the tower where she once lived. "I was born there," she said, raised behind walls and whispers. "Then let's end it where it began," Jace replied. The city was in chaos. News of the unsealing had spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered in the streets, watching the sky as the transport descended. Guards aimed their weapons, unsure whether to fire or kneel. The Golden Tower's gates opened, not from invitation but from fear. The High Warden waited inside, flanked by his enforcers. He wore ceremonial armor, black and silver, forged in the fires of 100 victories. But when Valari stepped into the hall bare-legged, proud, and glowing with energy, the armor looked old. The soldiers around him shifted, uncertain. They had never seen her like this. "You returned," the warden said, his voice low. "Good. I had hoped the iron would break your spirit, but now I see I must do it myself." "No," Valari said calmly. "You'll listen." Her voice echoed like thunder. "For 18 years, you told me I was weak, that I had no right to choose. You wrapped my body in chains and called it honor. You said I would thank you one day." She stepped closer. "But I don't thank you. I forgive you, but only because I will never let your chains fall on another." Gasps rose from the guards, some stepping back, some dropping their weapons. The iron had chosen her freedom, and the people saw it. Jace stood beside her, silent but steady. The warden drew a blade from his side, its edge humming with red light. "If no one will stop you," he growled. "Then I will." He charged forward, his blade raised. Valari raised her hands, not in fear, but in command. The iron energy still flowed through her skin. She caught his arm mid-strike, and the blade shattered in her grip. A wave of blue light burst from her body, throwing the warden backward. Across the hall, he hit the floor with a thud, groaning, armor cracked. Pride broken, the hall fell silent, every eye fixed on her. She turned slowly, facing the people. "I am no longer sealed," she said. "I am no longer silent. And I am no longer his." The crowd erupted, not in violence but in relief, in celebration. The chains had been broken, not just from her body, but from their minds. The High Warden lay in defeat, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, he realized that power enforced through fear could not last forever, especially not against the will of a daughter who chose freedom. Jace took her hand gently. "So what now?" he asked. She smiled, a real smile, soft and fearless. "Now," she said, "we leave this place behind. We find a new world." As the transport lifted from the palace roof, Valari looked down one last time. The tower looked smaller. Now not because it had changed, but because she had. She was no longer the girl behind the metal veil. She was the woman who broke it. The girl who chose the human asterisk stars stretched across the sky like rivers of silver fire. The old transport ship hummed quietly as it soared beyond Vorthan's atmosphere. Jace leaned back in the pilot's seat, bruises fading, burns healing, but eyes still sharp. Beside him, Valari sat with her knees drawn up, no longer hidden behind iron, no longer sealed away from the galaxy. She stared at the stars for a long time without speaking. Then, softly, "Do you think they'll follow us?" Jace looked at her and shrugged. "Maybe, but they won't catch us." She smiled faintly, her fingers brushing the edge of her seat, bare skin against fabric. Even that sensation still felt new. "What now?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Jace glanced at the navigation screen, then back at her. "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know," she said. "Everywhere. Someplace where people aren't locked for loving the wrong person. Someplace where tradition doesn't mean chains." He nodded slowly, then keyed in a course. "Then I know exactly where to start." The ship entered slipstream, stars turning into streaks of light. Valari closed her eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in her life, she could breathe without fear of who might control her next breath. She had her voice, her mind, her body all hers again. But something still lingered in her chest. Not fear, not regret, something else. She turned to Jace, eyes narrowing slightly. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "You could have left the tower that first day. You could have walked away and never returned." Jace looked at her, quiet for a moment. Then he answered, "Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a servant, not a threat. And you weren't scared of what I didn't understand." "I figured," he said with a smile, "I should return the favor." Valari blinked, then laughed softly. It was a sound that hadn't existed inside her for years. She leaned her head against the wall and whispered, "I never thought a human would be the key." "Neither did I," Jace said. "But I'm glad I was." They arrived days later at a floating colony above a green planet. A place known for artists, traders, and thinkers. No kings, no courts, no chains. The people greeted them with curiosity, not suspicion. Here, no one cared about iron pants or ancient laws. Valari walked the market streets barefoot, her skin touching stone, her laughter echoing in the open air. Children stared at her glowing skin, asking if she was made of stars. She just smiled and told them, "No, I was just locked away too long." Jace opened a small repair shop in the lower district, fixing old tech for credits. Valari painted the walls with starlight patterns, learning how to create beauty with her hands instead of fighting to survive. Every day, her steps grew stronger and her voice louder. Every night, she and Jace would sit under the twin moons and share stories about planets, about dreams, about things they never thought possible. Then one evening, she turned to him, serious and soft. "I never chose before," she said. "Everything was chosen for me. My clothes, my voice, my silence, my prison. But now I want to choose." Jace tilted his head, curious. She took his hand gently. "I want to choose you." He didn't speak right away, but the look in his eyes said everything. Not surprise, not disbelief, but the quiet joy of being seen. He squeezed her hand and whispered, "Then I choose you too." Years later, in the halls of a school built on the same colony, a small statue stood in a quiet garden. It showed a young alien girl, breaking open chains of metal with light bursting from her hands. At the base, a plaque read, "She was locked in iron for 18 years. But freedom was not given, it was claimed." The legend of Valari spread across the stars, not just as a girl who escaped, but as the one who chose her own story, her own voice, and her own human. And across every world, from deserts to cities, others who had been silenced began to stand, because one girl had proved that no chain was stronger than choice. The end.